All right, so here we're going to make the plane's body. So first thing we need to do here is we're going to zoom in. I'm going to do a whole bunch of work pretty much up in this corner of the screen. Every now and then I'll duck over here to see what's happening, after I make each object, but mostly I'm going to work right over here. This program is parameter driven. Parameters are the numbers we're going to see in certain fields. So I'm going to click the plus button right here in the hierarchy tab, and 3D object capsule. We're going to be making lots of those. And this first one's going to be called plane body. And granted, the typical way I would do this would be to get my rotate tool and make sure my gizmo up here is oriented the right direction. Am I missing something? Left mouse. There we go. Thank you. I'm going to swing that Z-axis around to the front. And I get my rotate tool here, and if I rotate this so that I can see that capsule's going in the point in the direction of my Z-axis, I know I've got it going in the direction to point in the right direction. And then looking over here, that all needs to be 0, 0, and 0 for position. But I'm going to change its rotation to 90 degrees in X. So I make sure for my plane body, it's got an X position of 0, Y position of 0, Z position of 0, and X rotation of 90. Look over here and see, okay, that's looking good. Now I'm going to get my scale tool. That's the hotkey for the scale tool is the R button. I want to make this thing longer, so I'm going to scale it just in the Y-axis. And the number that worked out for me was a nice, beautiful number called 3.5. 3.5 worked out as a really good scale for my plane body. It gives me a length that I want. However, looking at it from the front, it's still a little thicker than I want it to be. So to bring that thickness down a little bit, I dropped the scale in X to 0.8 and the scale in Z to 0.8. And that pretty much finished off the plane body. And putting those parameters guarantees you that you're off to a good start. Now, one thing to note here, when we rotated this capsule, its Z-axis is no longer pointing in the same direction as this Z-axis. That's because this axis up here is the world. That axis is local to that object. That object got rotated, so its axes got moved around. So the next object we're going to create here that's part of our plane is going to be the canopy. I'm going to click plus and 3D object, and capsule, and this one will be C-A-N-O-P-Y, canopy. And then again, first things first, as soon as you create an object, zero out its position. Always make sure it's position 0, 0, 0. That way it's beginning right from the center of what you're building. This will allow us to take advantage of the symmetry around the axes. So this one's also going to need a 90-degree rotation in X. That gets it tilted over. It's going to be the canopy for the plane's cockpit. And I'm going to have to change the scale a whole bunch. And I'm going to have to even change the position. For instance, I'm going to move it way forward on the ship here and get the scale tool. And, I could tweak the scale here and kind of get it to where I want it and get it looking pretty decent. And I even like that effect. But I got some numbers over here, and I just want to be consistent. So my numbers for my canopy were, see at 0.38, I wanted 0.4. Close, wasn't it? This next number, I'm a little off. In the scale in Y, I went with 0.5. In the scale in Z, I went with 0.3. And for its position, if I wanted to be really precise with its position, I went with 0.35 for the Y position and 2, just a nice round 2 for the Z position. And now I'm going to notice that this thing is placed pretty nicely right on the top of my plane's body, right about in the position where I want it to be. That's the canopy. Next object I'm going to make is going to be the left wing. So, capsule. All right, now the left wing, again, just like the others, zero out the properties here. And what I would do here is, let's see, rotate. I push that rotation because I know I want to rotate this over flat. And then I'll go take a look and see what parameter changed. The rotation in Z. Let me make that a nice 90 degrees. That way I know it's rotated over perpendicular to its previous position. Although these numbers are going to change. In fact, when the dust settles, 90 is going to be gone. Scaling this thing and even putting it into position. Let me get up in the air here a little bit and zoom out, move that over, and I'm going to get my move tool, and I'm going to move it kind of out here off to the side, get my scale tool, squeeze it down in X, squeeze it out in Y, and I'm going to rotate it so it's swept back a little bit and also swept up a little bit. And then I'm going to look at how that's all looking. Hit the F key to frame on that. Get my move tool, move it up a little bit, and I get my scale tool again because I can see that wing is still really thick and really squeeze that down. Now I'm going to go over to the transform and take a look at these numbers I have here that I've created. I've made a mess of all these numbers. So what I settled on for the left wing is -2 for the position, 0.02 for, 0.2 for the left wing's Y position, and 0.9 for the left wing Z position. Its rotation in X was 0, rotation in Y. What nice pretty number could I turn that into? And by pretty, I mean no decimal point. -15. And then, if you're playing along out there here in first block, you already know that I made that 85 degrees for the rotation in Z. Scale-wise, 0.05 for the thickness of the wing. That scale in X gives us the thickness of the wing. And 2.3 for the scale in Y, and 1 for the scale in Z. And if I come back over here and look at it, it almost looks like it just looked a moment ago, only because I only made some subtle, slight changes to it. But that gives me a nice wing in the spot where I want it. Now, this will be the first time where we're not going to create a new object. To get the right wing, we right-click and we select Duplicate. And then single-click in there and change the name to Right Wing. And all we have to do in order to get this right wing into position is change a few variables. The X variable for the position in X, make that a +2. The rotation in Y, make that a +15. And the rotation in Z, make that 95. And everything else is cool. If I come back over here, I'll see that indeed I've now got these two wings. They're like a mirror reflection of each other, and they're in position right where I want them. Happy with that. Now, the last thing that I made while I'm here speed modeling, 3D objects, capsule. This one's going to be the tail. And for my tail, well, look at that. It's way out of position, isn't it? First things first, zero out that position. So got to zero out that position for the tail. Although that's going to all change here in a moment because I know I'm going to want to squeeze it like that. And I know I'm going to want to move it back and up, and somebody wants to go somewhere, probably the bathroom. There we go. And I'd also tilt it back a little bit here. Frame on that so I could take a look at it here and check its position out, get the move tool, move it back a little bit further, and pretty much got it about where I want it. But let me now plug in the numbers that I decided on for my tail. And for my tail, I decided on 0 for the position in X, 0.44 for the position in Y, and negative 3.3 for the position in Z, just to keep them, relatively clean numbers. And then for the rotation in X for the tail, a negative 24 degrees, and no rotation in Y, no rotation in Z. And the scale in X for the tail, 0.05, making that tail as thin as we made our wing. And the scale in Y, 0.5, and the scale in Z, 0.6. And if I come back here and look at this, okay, doesn't look like it's changed much, does it? Because I only made minor, subtle tweaks to it, but it's where I want it. And it looks like a tail. Now, from here, I need to start making my stabilizers. So, cell phone zombies. This is the point where the cell phone zombies now have to put their cell phones away. And by put away, that means in your pocket, put them away. We're doing new stuff now. I'll get up and come out and do a check here in a little bit. And so please put your cell phones away. I can see I'm not being listened to. Let me go ahead and pause the recording just for a moment. I think so. Excellent. All right, so we're going to go ahead and make a new object. And for this object, I don't yet have ready-made numbers, but we're going to create them right now, and then I'm going to fill them out on my piece of paper, also known as my cheat sheet, so I can try to be consistent. So we're going to create a 3D object, and of course, we're making nothing but capsules. And this one's going to be my left stabilizer. That's what they call those little flat wings at the back of an airplane. They're called a stabilizer because they help the plane, maintain stability. They also allow the plane to, go up and go down. The tail actually pivots in order to create the yaw effect. So, as always, when we're creating these new objects, Unity keeps putting them in some bizarre place, and I have no idea how it decides what 6 decimal place location to put those objects, but go ahead and put that object at 000. And then I'm actually going to have to get out of the magnifier here and come into my scene view. I'm going to frame select on that thing, and I'm going to move it into position about right there. Get my rotate tool and make sure I'm rotating correctly here. Looks like that way or that way, one way or another. That way is a 4, that's a positive number, so we'll go positive 90 in Z. Get my scale tool, and I already know that that's going to 0.05 because that's just going to be consistent with all my other numbers. And I know some bright student's going to be going, Booth, if you just left it in there like that, you get your tail with just one object. Yeah, I know. But what if you wanted to style these a little bit? Tilt them up or tilt them back, give them a little style. If you make it just one piece, can't do that. Locked in. But we can do that with this. And anyway, once we've made one and got it where we want it, we can just duplicate it, change a few variables, and poof, like magic, it's right where we want it to be. So right at the moment, the stabilizer still is a bit large. It's about in the right spot there, but it's still a bit large. I think that's going to be a scale in Y. Let me see. Yeah. So now I'm actually scaling. I got my move tool active, but I'm using the sliders up here in the transform. I could also be doing that with the actual scale tool, and then get the move tool to move it back. Get that scale tool to scale that down a little bit. Let me get my rotate tool and give it a little rotation backwards and a little rotation upwards, and move it up. And then decide, am I happy with it? Further back. Little thinner. Generally happy with that. It's got a little bit of a tilt upwards. That's okay. A little bit of style there. Now, I've created a bunch of numbers that look ugly. Look at all these ugly numbers over here. Let me zoom in on these and let's settle on some decimal representations that'll work. Like this one right here. Is 0.5 okay? I think 0.5 is okay on my left stabilizer for X. What about this? I'm going to go with 0.1. And here I'm going to go with negative 3.1. Let me duck over here real quick and see. Am I still happy with it? I'm still happy with it. All right. My X scale. My scale, or rather my rotation in X. Not quite 1 degree. Make that a full -1. Rotation in Y, 15. Hey, do I need to change the name of my stabilizer? Did anybody notice? Do I need to change the name of my stabilizer? We'll check it in a second, okay? This one over here, 99. Let's make that a nice solid 100. My scale in X, I was happy with that. My scale in Y, I'm also going to make that 0.5. My scale in Z, 0.6. That'll clean that up. And BTW, I am going to have to change the name of my my left stabilizer, because when I moved it over there into position, and we'll see here in just a moment, it's on the right side. And he is returned to the scene of the crime. All right. So, like I said, you notice what side I put this on? It's on the right side, isn't it, Mr. Booth? So change left to right. And I just made the right stabilizer. But now that I've made the right stabilizer and I'm happy with its scale, its rotation, its position, I'm happy with all that stuff. I don't know, the position. Do I really want to move it back just a little bit more? I think I do. So I just moved it back in Z. So let's make this a -3.3. There we go. That'll do, donkey. A -3.3. And then other numbers went funky on me here. So that should be 0.1. And then for my tail in X, it'll just be 0. Oh, definitely not. 0.5. All I really wanted to change was its X position. Yeah. All right. So that's what I've settled on for my right stabilizer. 0.5, 0.1, and -3.3 for X, Y, and Z positions. -1, +15, +100 for X, Y, and Z rotations. 0.05, 0.5, and 0.6 for the scale in X, Y, and Z. Now I'm going to duplicate it. To duplicate an object, we right-click it, and we select Duplicate. And now I will change left, or rather right, to left. And I'll take out that 1 right there. To get it into position, just like magic, set its X position to a -0.5. Set its Y rotation to a -15, and set its Z rotation to 80. And it's going to be exactly where I want it. I hope I'm right. Let me quickly look. Cha. There it is, right where I want it. So my left stabilizer, negative 0.5 for its x, 0.1 for y, negative 3.3 for z, negative 1 for the rotation in x, negative 15 for the rotation in y, 80 for the rotation in z. I better check that rotation in x. I better double check that. I'm going to double check that rotation in x. And scale 0.05, 0.5, and 0.6. Those numbers all appear to be working for me. But let me check one other thing here. Rotation in z. I think it's going to still be okay. Look at it from a straight up orthographic from the top, orthographic from the left, graphic from the back. Looks good. Yep, I'm happy with it. Now, when I'm starting to use this gizmo right here, once that started to move around, you're kind of are stuck in it. If I hold my Alt key down and right mouse click, then it's still going to say right here. But if you click on this once or twice, you'll get it back to persp. What do you think persp means, class? What does persp mean? What do you think? Perspective. Yeah, that. So you want to try to keep it in perspective. So like if you do get into like ISO, and ISO can look a little weird when you're trying to look at it. If you get into ISO, just click ISO and get it back to perspective, and it'll be back in the perspective view. So that's our stabilizers. Now, our plane is almost complete, but there's two other objects I want to add to our plane, and that would be jet engines. Bobby, would you please put your cell phone inside my box right here? Thank you. Put it inside my box. You put it there, you'll pick it up later. Who's next? Alrighty. We're going to, now for the jet engine, capsule, cylinder. It's a tough call. Let me double look at these here things and think about it. In my 3D objects, sphere, could squeeze that and be round on the front and the back, and different than the cylinders would just be flat in the front and back. Yep, I'm just going to use a capsule. So this is going to be my left jet engine. Left jet engine. First things first, zero out its scale. And just for a good starting point, I'm going to set all three scales to 0.3. Just shrink the whole thing down to 3/10 of full size. And I believe also I'm going to need a 90-degree rotation in X. For sure, 90-degree rotation in X. Now, you could see it. My left jet engine, you could see it here in the middle of this thing. And that's weird. The gizmo's acting weird. If your gizmos ever act weird, save, close. Well, you don't close because you guys take forever to reopen, don't you? But when my gizmo misbehaves, I just reload the project. It happens once in a while. The gizmo will misbehave and be like, why is the gizmo not where it's supposed to be? When I select my left engine, that's where that gizmo is supposed to be, right on that left engine. Now I'm going to move it over here to the left side and maybe even move it over here into position under the wing where I think an engine should be. And then I will get my scale tool. It's too low. Look at this from the bottom. Oh, we're not touching the wing. generally pretty happy with that. It's a jet engine. So let's see here. What am I settling on? For y, 0.8. My x position, negative 1.7. My y position, I'm just going to go with 0.01. Make sure that, yep, I'm still in contact with the wing. All right. And then my z position, 0.93. So that's going to be my left jet engine. Negative 1.7, 0.01, and 0.93. 90 degree in X, 0 in Y and Z for rotations, 0.3, 0.8, and 0.3 in my scales. And that sets the left engine. I'm going to duplicate this one now because this is a case where I get something for free. So duplicate the left engine. Once the left engine's made, you can duplicate it. And you get your right engine. And what needs to change? The value in X, that needs to become positive. And I think that's it. Just the value in X becomes positive. It's now over on the other side, attached to the underside of the wing on the other side. If I look at this from a straight front view, I can see from a straight front view. And to do that, I had to click. I'm in perspective here. And I clicked the Z stick. And then I clicked the little square that the Z stick's coming out from. And that forces me into a hard 90-degree front view. And I could see, yeah, these two engines are right where I want them. And my aircraft is made. Yes. Yes, you can see the numbers. Let me zoom in on them again. And the only difference between the left jet engine and the right jet engine, the only difference is the X position. The right jet engine's got an X position of 1.7. The left jet engine's got an X position of negative 1.7. And whoop, there it is. Now, this is a whole collection of objects. We're going to have to deal with this whole collection of objects because we can't make a flying plane that's just like 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 loose objects in the hierarchy. These all need a parent, a mommy or a daddy, that's oriented in the right direction. And then all of these objects that make our plane are going to become a child of that parent object. So now we're going to create that parent object. It's going to be our plane, the actual plane. So for this, I'm going to click plus, and I'm going to create an empty. This is a new one. And creating an empty, when you create an empty, all you get is a transform. That's it. An empty game object, the only component it has is a transform. And I'm going to name this one plane pivot. That's the pivot for my plane. And I need to make sure that that pivot is at 0, 0, 0. Those are the values for the plane pivot. Position and rotation, nothing but zeros. Scale, nothing but ones. That's going to actually, if you look at it over here, if I click on my plane body, look at the gizmo for the plane body. And if I click on my plane pivot, do you notice those two gizmos are basically in the same spot with one little difference? The orientation of the axis. Remember, we rotated our plane body 90 degrees in X, didn't we? when we rotated the plane's body 90 degrees in X, that caused the Z-axis for the plane's body to now be pointed in the wrong direction. So, but the plane pivot that we have here, its X-axis is definitely pointing in the same direction as this X-axis for the world, isn't it? Pardon me. The Z-axis is pointing in the same direction as this Z-axis in the world. And we need these two axes to be pointing in the same direction because this is what forward is. Forward in the Unity game engine is what direction is the Z-axis pointing. The Z-axis points to forward in the Unity game engine. It's not like that in all programs. But in Unity, they decided forward is the Z-axis. Yeah, George? The what? Nothing but zeros. It's my IQ all over the place, except for the scales, which is my IQ plus 1. Now, what we're going to do here with that plane pivot in the right spot, we're going to select our plane body, hold our shift key down, and select all of the objects. I clicked on the last one. You could also do this one at a time, though that would be boring. Shift, 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 shift. You know, I'm holding shift down the whole time. But the brute force is just select the first object, mouse over the last one, press shift, click your mouse. You get the whole list selected, don't you? What I want you to do is I want you to drag these objects and drop them into the plane pivot. Without seeing me, can you handle that? Drag them and drop them into the plane pivot. Anybody have success? Without even seeing me. Yeah, like I said, drag them. And when you actually mouse over the plane pivot, you're going to notice a couple things. Blue line here, blue line there, and then here. That's right over the plane pivot, isn't it? If I release that now, all of these are indented and placed underneath the plane pivot, and now plane pivot's got the little triangle. And that means I could do this. I can hide that. I can collapse it in my hierarchy. Another cool thing, I just made my plane disappear, the whole thing, didn't I? There's a little eye icon off to the side. If you mouse over here, if you want to hide something fast, you can hide it by using that function. So, and another thing too, with the plane pivot selected, we can see a bunch of stuff here. And you know what all that stuff is? It's the colliders. And in fact, later on, when we're needing to detect for collisions, this year, one new thing I'd like to do this year is I'd like to create an anti-aircraft weapon that shoots at our aircraft in the sky. And to have something shoot at the aircraft in the sky, we're going to need to have those colliders adjusted. Because right now, those colliders are set to the full size of the capsules, aren't they? But each of those colliders can be adjusted so that they approximate very closely the shape of the mesh that they're attached to. We'll look at that later. So basically, we're just going to steal all the scale values for our meshes and set the scale values of the collider to those values. And bam, the colliders will match the mesh. But we're not going to worry about that right now. So here's where I got to come out and do a check. And that's also where I'm going to end the video for this stage. And then in the next stage, we're going to turn this into a prefab and we're going to paint it. Dum, dum, dum. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.